see you all here. I think I'm speaking to an audience with a wide range of interest, education, background, and international connections. If you're not now, many of you will be involved in international negotiations in the next century. How, when, and why are most fascinating questions. I don't know those answers. I look forward to seeing what each of you does in the international arena in the coming decades. Dr. Anwar kindly furnished me some material on international negotiations and marketing with some emphasis on Japan. Dr. Anwar is one of the more fascinating people I've met. He's a nut on information. When I ask him a question, he's got information about it anywhere in the world. But interestingly enough, his papers did not exactly fit my negotiations in international negotiating, nor do they replicate the comments by Richard Russell, the CEO of TechSpray, at the recent seminar that Dr. Anwar gave on international marketing. Nor will I believe I will duplicate what Norman Stupi will say today. Why not? Because every situation in the international game is totally different. So today, I'm going to give you some personal principles of international negotiations, followed by personal experiences. The key element will always be adaptability. My assignments have always been as a mining exploration geologist or mineral economist, seeking information, evaluating mineral properties, or attempting to acquire a legal option on a property. Before I start the description of principles, I want to tell you when not to negotiate from two personal experiences. The first was in 1963 in a hotel in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, with my wife, the blonde, sitting back there. And we got in a pretty tight spot in a revolution that marked the end of the Alliance for Progress. And finally, we went to our room on the third floor. The hotel had a butane tank on top of our room. And in the middle of the crossfire of the revolution, a sniper hit that butane tank. Soldiers were entering the lobby. The hotel was on fire. So we decided we would try to escape. Went to the front door, and there was obviously machine gun fire there. So we decided to do the intelligent thing. We got sheets and tied an escape rope to go out the bathroom window, at which point a sniper saw us and took a couple shots at us. And my most famous quote of my life is the quote, before I did what I felt was necessary, i.e. crawl under the bed with my wife and wait to see what happened. I told her, Pam, I promised you adventure, but this is ridiculous. That's no time to negotiate. The second time was no time to negotiate was when we were in Prague, Czechoslovakia in '68, and the Russian tanks moved into Wenceslas Square, and our hotel overlooked Wenceslas Square. We were proud of our room with a bay window overlooking the square. The second night we decided not to negotiate, but to escape to the back of the hotel until the shooting was over. Now for my principles of international negotiation. Principle number one, always number one, learn about the country and its people. Whenever you go to make a deal, learn as much as you can. Talk to knowledgeable people. There are people in this room that are the best sources of information. Students, businessmen, Dom Henschke on Australia. He's here for 1 year, tax expert from Australia. If you have that chance, that's where you start. You contact the U.S. government agencies, Department of Commerce, all the agencies that have information, and you use your library. Luke Morrison there at the Amarillo Public Library, or the West Texas A&M Library, a block away. You contact the consulates. Anything you can do to acquire as much information and understanding of the country to which you are going to negotiate. And especially if you can find an expert in your field. I was in Mongolia last year for the World Bank, and just a couple weeks ago, a man going to Mongolia came and spent 2 days with me. He said since he was only going to be in Mongolia for 2 weeks, he had to go to the right place at the right time and find the right people. So the expense of coming to Amarillo to talk to me was insignificant, because he was spending several $1,000s on a trip to Mongolia, and he would only be there 2 weeks. And if he sat in a hotel room for the first week, he lost half of his negotiating opportunities in Mongolia. Principle number 2, develop patience. Listen. We all enter a situation wanting to present something. Stop and listen. I do teaching and seminars in addition to my business. And it's always you want to pitch your story. You want to tell people something. No. Stop and listen. Ask questions. It will change what you say and do. Patience is a difficult thing. I worked in Nicaragua for ASARCO in the jungles of eastern Nicaragua in 1960. And I realized then, and have been working since then, on ideas I developed to explore for new mineral deposits in the jungles of Nicaragua. I've waited 33 years. It has not been time to negotiate until right now, as both Cuba and Nicaragua change, and there will be opportunities for all of us before the end of this century. Bolivia, I was there for the World Bank about 2 years ago. I learned patience in dealing with the Bolivians and learned to listen to what they had to say and what they want to do. And now as Bolivia comes full circle from the early mining development to the nationalization, communism, and now back to a free enterprise system, they're looking for answers. But they don't want you to come and make demands. They want you to listen. They want you to be patient. Principle number 4, and a very powerful principle which few international businessmen take time to do, is educate with sensitivity. My first trip to Mongolia was 1991 with 2 colleagues to give the first workshop seminar ever given in the country of Mongolia. And the leaders of government were so anxious to learn that we wanted to have about 15 to 25 people. Well, they went to 25. They said, well, we'll take about 4 days was the seminar we were going to present. You ordinarily you'd expect you'd see the same people, but they changed every 4 hours. And it was tough to pick up. But the fact that we were willing to teach probably, I think, is the best way to negotiate. When you learn, you respect. When you respect, you set the scene for good negotiations. I was back for the World Bank then last year. One thing I did, and I did it without thinking very much, because of my visit in 91, I knew what the situation was for information. in Mongolia. So I took some of my own money and part of my own library, I bought some more books, paid a lot of excess baggage, and took a small basic library on mineral economics and mining geology to Mongolia. I did it innocently. The fact that I did it, and I'm not taking credit for it, just keeps coming back to me. People keep saying to the Mongolians, said, the experts, the consultants, the people coming to negotiate, come, get information, leave, and never leave anything for us. They feel that most foreign aid is not really that. It's sort of a one-way street of experts coming and giving lectures or showing pictures or giving out something. But the fact that you left a library that we will use for mineral development turns out to be unusual and valuable. And I propose it as any one of you who get involved in international negotiations, make sure you leave something by which they felt it was a true exchange. In China, in 1980, where I participated in a business conference on mining, it's interesting that at that point in time, the Chinese were starting to launch their economic miracle. It's now occurred. And I thought how, as it was that they understood what education, communication was all about. The conference we went to on the Yellow Sea at Betaho was the big new conference center. And the conference center was built with a lecture hall surrounded by huge hallways. I thought it was an unusual waste of time. Then I saw the schedule of the conference. Paper was scheduled, and then there would be tea time. And there were the typical Chinese round tables surrounding. And we all went and then talked. And they understood and had built the conference center on the fact that the true way to negotiate and get information is not just to talk, it's to get, not to listen, but to get together and discuss. Principle number 4, be yourself with no apologies. One thing does bother me a little bit on all the handbooks and negotiations is this is what you have to do and how you have to act and that type of thing. Yes, understand the culture of the country you're in, but for goodness sakes, be yourself. Take some boots from Amarillo. Say Amarillo. Take as many as you can. But when you're negotiating, just open up. Some countries of the world, people are very restrained. You don't have to be restrained. You're an open American. You're an unusual individual, and be that. Be sensitive, but be yourself. Last November, I was in Albania, where the first look, you walk in, and here's a place that's been a prison for 50 years. The country's been a prison. Ocha makes Stalin look like a Sunday school teacher. You walk in there. How do you act differently? I said, I do the same thing I'm doing today. I wave my hands and talk about experiences and project my ideas. And in that case, because we were negotiating to sign options on mineral properties, we didn't know how to make contact. These people didn't know how to talk to Western mining people. They'd never met any. So after the Mongolian experience, I gave three-hour seminars and talked and listened, and after that, the floodgates opened. All of a sudden, the next day, there was a car, which was a rare thing in November of last year in Albania. I think there were 800 of them in a country of 2 million people at the beginning of 1992. There was a car to take us to mining properties. We hadn't even started to negotiate. they had already figured out from the seminars, they liked the fact that we wanted to teach. And off we went to a copper mine, met with the manager, and said, I'll sell it to you personally. Then in negotiation you learn, you have to figure out what kind of authority the guy that you're dealing with has to buy the copper mine. It was all ready for sale. Principle number 5, communicate. If possible, learn the language. That sounds tough, but boy, my brother's lived his entire life in Japan. His kids are bicultural and bilingual. And his son raised $73 million for Stanford in Japan because he could communicate. In this case, not only in terms of language, but in terms of the culture. So when he went to see the chairman of Honda Motor Company, I'm sure he was a big, tall American, but his Japanese was flawless. Now, if you can't learn the language, learn a few words. My wife is the great example. In fact, I just wait for her to tell me what are these various words. And that's magic, to say hello, and especially thank you or excuse me. Excuse me. I'm counting on her to learn 3 phrases in Nebraskan. If any of you know how to speak Nebraskan, I'm counting on. There's your guy. And this communication becomes important. 3-4 years ago, I was in northern Spain trying to investigate where the old Roman gold mines were on the north coast of Spain, operated by slaves, and they were all covered. That part of Spain is heavy vegetation. Went out with a geologist, and we just went in and we started to talk to farmers. And one by one, they led us to all those Roman gold mines. It was crucial to be able to talk to them, to negotiate, in that case, for the information on where the old Roman gold mines were. And all there were just little humps, and in one case, we were able to enter one of the old mines. 6, which sounds maybe a little redundant, but don't forget your objective. Why are you there? What you want to do? Sometimes things are so glamorous or interesting, or in the case of Czechoslovakia, kind of dangerous. But always remember why you're there. And in all your negotiations, you don't have to be ashamed or clever or anything like that. State your objective. Why you're there. Any games will always catch up with you. In Argentina, I was with the United Nations quite a few years ago, and the press took off after me because I'd worked for private U.S. mining companies prior to working on that assignment in the United Nations. And I said, should I cover this up? No. My assignment is to encourage private investment in copper mining in Argentina. So I got up in front of the newspaper interviewers and radio and said, this is why I'm here. This is why I work for the United Nations. This is what I want to do. There's no substitute for clearly remembering your objective and stating it clearly. Seek creative solutions. The revolution in Honduras lasted for 3 days. Second day was when all the shooting was concerned, but it was pretty dicey for 3 days. In the 3 days, most of the foreign businessmen in Honduras had left. I had a cable from Asarco saying, abandon everything, escape. And I looked around and said, gee, this is an opportunity. So I went to the head of the secret police and said, all the investors have gone. The president says we need investment. I'm a real live investor, but I need a carte blanche to go out and look at the geology of Honduras. I forget what the name is in Spanish. I needed a special paper. And he said, yes, we'll give you a paper. He said, so they took me over to somebody sitting in a typewriter. And he said, well, tell her what you want in the paper. So I wrote a magnificent document. Talk about powerful negotiations. When I was done, went back to the hotel room and said, gee, it wasn't official looking enough. So that document had postage stamps, U.S. postage stamps. I had a whole block of S&H green stamps. They were magnificent. And for the next several months, as I wandered through Honduras and went through a military checkpoint, I always handed it to the young soldier that was there upside down, so I could know whether he read or not, because most of them would look at it. I would say whose name was the head of the secret police, and it was magic. And I went to, I think it was in Honduras, Pure Oil, something like that, Pure Oil, and all their people had abandoned Honduras. So I went and there was this poor, pitiful, scared secretary. I showed her the paper and said, I understand I should have access to your aerial photography and maps, which are the most precious and confidential everything. And so I sat at a table, something like this, and she would bring them in to me for 2 days. Then I figured, that's enough creative solutions. I've got my information. It disappeared. Principle number 8, make friends. That's number 1. So much of our news is negative, but the whole world is becoming better friends. I see that in this room, those of you who've come from other countries to study here in West Texas. Those friendships are hopefully lasting things. And the fact that you've met people from other countries, they are your friends, makes you a better negotiator.